This woman had been pregnant for 12 months but showed no signs of giving birth. Doctors admitted that even quintuplets wouldn't cause a belly that big. When they lifted her shirt, the enormous size of her stomach shocked everyone. A typical pregnant woman's abdominal circumference is around 100 centimeters, but hers had reached a terrifying 160 centimeters. Ultrasound imaging revealed no sign of a fetus inside her swollen belly. Even more puzzling, her internal organs were nowhere to be found. But if she had no organs, how was she still alive? The woman is Peng Shimei, from Huazhou in Guangdong Province, China. Her belly had become so large that even going to the bathroom was difficult. Breathing normally became a luxury. The blood vessels on her stretched skin were clearly visible, looking as if they might burst at any moment. When touched, her belly felt as hard as a rock. Doctors were alarmed. Even seasoned obstetricians had never seen a case like this. When they realized that ultrasound wasn't effective, they planned a CT scan. But there was a problem. Peng Shimei's belly was so big that she couldn't fit into the machine. Everyone was stumped. Seeing her helpless eyes, the doctors were overwhelmed with urgency. Diagnosing the condition is a basic principle in medicine, but without even knowing what she had, there was no way to begin treatment. It was then that Peng Shimei revealed the origin of her swollen belly. Before falling ill, she had been a young, beautiful woman. Through an introduction, she met her now husband, who was also quite handsome. They were a well-matched couple. However, despite being married for years, Peng Shimei had never gotten pregnant. In Chinese culture, it said, of the 3 unfilial acts, having no descendants is the worst. Her mother-in-law desperately wanted a grandchild. And as time passed with no pregnancy, Peng Shimei became the subject of gossip in her village. Her mother-in-law, increasingly anxious, turned to folk remedies. Understanding her mother-in-law's desire, Peng Shimei obediently drank whatever concoctions were given to her, no matter how strange. One day, her mother-in-law found another remedy from an unknown source, and just like always, Peng Shimei drank it without hesitation. Soon after, her belly began to swell, appearing as if she really was pregnant. The whole family was overjoyed, looking forward to the birth of the child. As the pregnancy progressed, her belly visibly grew. Within 3 months, it looked like she was 7 or 8 months along. But the bigger her belly became, the worse her health got. Her face turned pale, she became weak, and breathing became difficult. She fainted several times. Everyone began to realize that something was wrong. She had been pregnant for an entire year, yet there was no sign of labor. Her husband couldn't wait any longer and took her to the hospital. The diagnosis was devastating. Like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, what looked like pregnancy turned out to be a massive ovarian tumor. The doctors explained that this type of cancer is hard to detect early. By the time it's discovered, it's often already advanced. Surgery could remove the tumor, but she would lose her ability to have children. Worse still, if it came back, her life would be in danger. But if she refused treatment, she only had 2 or 3 years left to live. To avoid becoming a financial burden on her husband, Peng Shimei chose to forgo the surgery. She decided to spend her remaining days at home. Tragically, her selflessness wasn't appreciated. Her husband filed for divorce. Still kind and dignified, Peng Shimei didn't argue. At that point, she probably no longer had any attachment to the world. So she quietly packed her belongings and left on her own. But she didn't return to her parents' home, because her family was poor too, and Peng Shimei didn't want to burden them any further. In the end, she wandered the streets with her enormous belly. Wherever she went, people treated her like a pregnant woman. When she took the bus, many people would offer her their seat. Although those moments warmed her heart, only she knew the bitterness she carried inside. As time passed, Peng Shimei's condition worsened. Her stomach became alarmingly huge, and even taking care of herself became nearly impossible. The painful days dragged on for 2 years, and she realized her time was running out. Like a walking corpse, she stumbled to the riverside. She thought about the memories she had with her husband and her aging parents back home. Tears of despair rolled down her cheeks. Just as she was about to jump, she suddenly noticed ants on the ground. Watching the tiny ants climb upward with such determination, she couldn't help but compare them to herself. If even such small creatures could fight for life so fiercely, how could she give up so easily? Her primal will to survive was reawakened. But the pain never stopped tormenting her. Life was unimaginably difficult, but she never gave up hope. Still, she knew her days were numbered. Once a beautiful woman, She now only wished to preserve a bit of dignity. Penniless, Peng Shimei made her way to a hospital. She thought that if she were to die there, at least the doctors might cremate her. In despair, she sat in a hospital chair, refusing to eat or drink, simply waiting for the end. Then one day, a man appeared and completely changed Peng Shimei's life. Director Su, who had traveled from Guangzhou for a medical consultation, noticed the woman who had been sitting at the hospital for several days. At first, he too thought she was an ordinary pregnant woman. But after learning about her story, Director Su felt deeply sympathetic for the young woman and offered to treat her free of charge. Hearing that someone was willing to save her reignited her will to live. He said, "Even if you have no money, I'll treat you for free," she recalled. She was so moved that she burst into tears. Her tears flowed uncontrollably. As a top-tier doctor, Director Su quickly discovered the reason why her internal organs had seemingly disappeared. It turned out that not only was there a massive tumor inside her belly, but there was also a large amount of fluid buildup caused by the tumor. Peng Shimei's condition was diagnosed as abdominal compartment syndrome, a very dangerous condition. The accumulated fluid had compressed her internal organs, pushing them upward in her body and putting her life at constant risk. One can only imagine the level of pain this poor woman was enduring. Her case was already severe, and Director Su believed that without immediate surgery, she could die at any moment. But before surgery, they had to drain the fluid from her abdomen. Unfortunately, that wasn't easy. She had already been suffering from shortness of breath. If they drained all the fluid at once, her lungs, compressed for so long, could react unpredictably, which could lead to serious complications. There were no prior cases to rely on, so the doctors had to proceed cautiously. Director Su suggested draining the fluid in small amounts each day, which would gradually ease the pressure on her internal organs. Even though the doctors were extremely careful, by the third day, after draining a total of 30,000 milliliters of abdominal fluid, Peng Shimei began to experience the very breathing difficulties they had feared. But at that moment, Peng Shimei was the one comforting the doctors. She told them that it was okay even if they couldn't save her. After all, she already felt lucky to have lived this long. She even said that after she passed, she would be willing to donate her body to the hospital for research. Her kindness moved everyone present. Even though her condition was critical, the doctors never gave up. After making emergency adjustments to the fluid drainage and oxygen supply, Peng Shimei's vital signs finally stabilized. With her abdomen now smaller, she was finally able to undergo a CT scan. The truth behind the suffering she'd endured for 2 years was finally revealed. Once the size and location of the tumor were confirmed, the next question was when to perform surgery. Drainage continued for another week. In total, over 50,000 milliliters of fluid were removed, the equivalent of more than 100 bottles of beer. Director Su was amazed. This woman was incredibly strong. She had endured such a severe illness for so long and still managed to survive. Her family had never shown up during this time. Later, Director Su learned that Peng Shimei had chosen not to tell her parents about her condition, so she wouldn't burden them. "I made them worry too. I really want to say I'm sorry to them," she said. Even in the face of death, Peng Shimei was still thinking of her family. The doctors couldn't help but admire her. She was truly kind-hearted. With the fluid fully drained and after a few days of recovery, the surgery to remove the tumor could finally proceed. Director Su personally performed the operation. During the procedure, they discovered that the tumor had affected her ovaries and uterus, and had also spread to the abdominal cavity and intestines. After a long surgery, a tumor weighing 2,300 grams was finally removed. The operation was a great success, and as Peng Shimei recovered, her outlook on life also began to change. "I don't want to hate anyone. Hating someone is exhausting," she said. The kind-hearted Peng Shimei no longer resented her ex-husband, though she still longed to have a child of her own. After recovering, Peng Shimei didn't return home. Instead, she chose to stay at the hospital as a volunteer, helping others in need, just as Director Su had helped her. She believed the hospital had given her a second chance at life, and she wanted to give back to a society full of love. At Fuda Hospital, she was often seen busy helping out. She would move from ward to ward, chatting with patients, sharing her own story, and encouraging others to keep fighting. This woman, who once stood on the edge of death, had found her miracle, and it was all thanks to the doctors. She felt nothing but deep gratitude for this second chance at life. Later, Peng Shimei remarried and became a stepmother to 3 children. She lived a happy and fulfilling life. From being abandoned and homeless to being saved and reborn in the hospital, Peng Shimei had seen the best and worst of humanity. But after experiencing the warmth of others, she still chose to treat everyone with kindness. That quality is truly rare and precious. She continued to approach the world with the greatest compassion. Through Peng Shimei's story, people were reminded of how hard life can be for women, and of the need for more understanding when it comes to childbirth and fertility. Not everyone is as lucky as Peng Shimei. To prevent tragedies like this, society must show more empathy and tolerance.